everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, we have an I find it interesting topic to discuss tonight.
I came across a couple of things, came across my Facebook feed just out of the blue and from two completely different sources, different like memes and two different sources, but they were all about Gene Autry and his Cowboy code. For those of you who don't know Gene Autry, singing cowboy from all the way back to the 30s, I guess, but
the original singing cowboy.
Yes, the original singer before Roy Rogers stole his act. Gene Autry started in radio in the 30s. Apparently, went on to do television and movies.
He was born in Oklahoma. He was a telegraph operator. Orvon Grover Autry, nicknamed Gene Autry, and he was a telegraph operator. And during midnight shifts and telegraph, by the way, look up telegraph, right? If you don't know what that
precursor
was.
to the fax machine,
right? He he was a telegraph operator, and during his overnight shifts, he would sing and play guitar to amuse himself. And one day, a telegraph customer, heard him and encouraged him to sing professionally. The customer was Will Rogers. Will Rogers was a renowned humorist, really brilliant. There's a
cowboy philosopher.
There's a statue of Will Rogers in the Capitol.
Yeah,
because he was a political humorist too, and one of the early political humorists on radio and in film. And so Autry got some money together, went to New York, auditioned for a recording company, a record company in those days, and he sang on radio. He sang on radio and signed a recording deal eventually, and he eventually got into movies,
right,
as a singing cowboy with his horse Champion
the Wonder Horse.
Champion the Wonder Horse. And I have an image to share of his. This is a poster for his one of his movies, Riders in the Sky, based on the song. So he recorded the song, and and then they made a movie around it, and you can see him, with Champion the Wonder Horse and with the 6-gun
snaffle
bit, snaffle, and his 6-gun and his guitar, and punching the bad guy and rescuing the damsel and so on and so on.
So these were the movies he was in, were black and white serial movies, and same character with the lone cowboy wandering across the wet. Never seemed to actually drive any cattle, just sort of wandered around, came upon towns, and never, like a lot of 50s cowboys, he was never really seen to be a working cowboy. He was just kind of an itinerant guy on a horse.
And he recorded records, he sang on radio, he did films, and eventually he had a television series in the 50s, one of those one of the many television cowboys. His biggest hit and his theme song became Back in the Saddle Again,
Yeah.
that well-known song.
Well,
Made more
used to be a well-known song.
He made more than 640 recordings, and he wrote or co-wrote 300 songs. His records sold more than 100 million copies, and he had more than a dozen gold and platinum records, including the first record ever certified gold. That means a certain number of sales. He also sang Christmas songs. Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Here Comes Santa Claus, that he wrote.
Yep.
Frosty the Snowman, and his biggest hit was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yes,
exactly. So he had quite a lucrative and storied career.
He did,
mostly as a singer. The cowboy thing was just everything was about cowboys when he.
Well, and he was legitimately from Oklahoma. So
yeah, but a telegraph operator is a far cry from a cowhand.
That's true, but he could ride.
He could ride, yes.
Yeah,
could ride and shoot. Did a lot of his own stunts,
such
as they were.
He was no Yakima Canutt, who for those who don't know, was legitimately a cowboy and was the best of the early stuntmen.
Yeah,
and was quite a remarkably accomplished person.
But the reason we are talking about Gene Autry is not for his singing, but for his cowboy code. There we have nine
10
rules for the cowboy. Now, looking at these rules and knowing this, to me is wholly manufactured by the studio that he worked for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but some of these touch on our virtues.
They do, and they're consistent with similar codes in that era. These first came up in the 40s, I think, but throughout the 40s and 50s, Superman had a code, and the Lone Ranger had a code, and so these were very similar. There were lots of iterations of these.
Right. I think it's interesting to examine this because they're all good. I mean, they're all virtuous things, but they're very clearly a mid 20th century American capitalist list.
Yes, and they are consistent with the virtues. They're also very consistent with the Boy Scouts code. And as we previously discussed, the origin of the Boy Scouts was the Boy Scouts, the modern iteration of the Boy Scouts as we know it, were created by Victorian neo-medievalists. And the early Boy Scout posters showed scouts and an image of a knight in armor behind them. So, and my favorite Western, I wouldn't call him a cowboy, but Western TV character was Paladin, who was referred to as a knight without armor in a savage land. Right. And of course, a paladin, which was his nom de guerre. So, so Gene Autry's Cowboy Code.
Right. So let's get into this.
Okay. Let me.
So the first one. Oh, wait, before we get into this.
Oh, yes.
What are you drinking?
Oh, I have this is a red wine from the V. Satui winery in Napa.
Gesundheit.
V. Satui. V is the initial. Satui, from the Satui family. Yes, funny, very funny. Not really. In Napa, this is a 2018 Satui family red. The story is that this is the wine that was served at their table, their family. This was their family everyday wine. It's a 2018. It's a very nice, very drinkable. Goes with lots of food. Is a very good, very nicely balanced red wine. We visited the Satui winery. We went to Napa for our anniversary and visited the Satui winery and another winery created by one of the Satui family, Dario Satui, down the road, which is Castello di Amorosa. And it's a replica of a 14th century Tuscan castle.
Yeah.
And that's really, the wines are really great there too. So different in style, but also very, very good. So that's what I have. What do you have this evening?
I've got just a little glass of a salted caramel whiskey that we found just the other day called Duke and Dame. So once again, a victim of merchandising. It's an amusing flavored whiskey.
There's nothing with hardly any presumption.
No, none at all, except for except I would say for the font choice on the bottle was a little presumptuous.
Oh, okay. Well, here.
Oh. All right. So you're going to put the list up?
Yes, I will do
for
that.
A minute, and then we'll go back.
Okay. So the Cowboy, and by Cowboy, of course, Cowboy was a specific occupation.
Really. Yes, right.
But Cowboy has, I think, became a generic term for anyone in the West who rode a horse.
Well, yeah. You wear a particular kind of hat and boots, and you ride a horse, and you wear a 6-gun, and you're a cowboy.
Right. So that's the first thing. But cowboy must never shoot first, hit a smaller man, or take unfair advantage.
Very, very much in the chivalric tradition.
Yes.
At least the Victorian chivalric tradition. I don't think our actual medieval ancestors really cared whether you hit a smaller man or not. I think that was preferred, actually, to
well, and small is so there's now Gene Autry was not a huge man. He was not of the stature of another TV Western star, Clint Walker, who played Cheyenne Bodie, who was 6.5 feet tall and built like a bodybuilder. And so it's, I think this is, now keep in mind the audience for this Cowboy Code were kids.
Sure. And well, this is certainly aimed at kids.
Right. So what they're talking about is, this is an anti-bullying code.
Yes,
this first part, anti-bullying, which I think is good.
Yeah.
I think is valuable. The never shooting first thing was a trope of Westerns.
Yeah, right. This Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and the Cisco Kid and any number of those Western serial heroes goes into making one of my favorite movies, Rustler's Rhapsody.
Oh yeah,
is a conglomeration of all of these sort of tropes and sort of turned on its side and made some fun of, but we've said before, this is all of these things. This whole cowboy thing is central to American culture. I mean,
yes.
In the 50s, what was it? 8 out of 10 programs were Westerns on television.
I don't know what the exact number was, but there were sure a lot of them, and I watched them all.
Yeah.
Even Sugarfoot, which was
oh my God. Even in some ways, Zorro is kind of a Western. It's just more sword centric than gun centric.
Yes. And Zorro was my other favorite.
I know that. That's why I brought him up.
And when I was a kid, I had I had the whole outfit.
Oh yeah, we've
and
gone
I had
over
a
this a couple times.
plastic Zorro sword that with a piece of, you could stick a piece of chalk in the end and put Z's on things with chalk, and then the tip broke off and I had a sharp point, and I found that was even more useful.
So
So
Cowboy
why
was
don't
so Cowboy
we
first
just
shoot
quickly
first.
go through these and
Okay.
then take away the list from the screen and just talk about them.
Okay. Good.
So he must never go back on his word or on a trust confided in him. He must always tell the truth. He must be gentle with children, the elderly, and animals. He must not advocate or possess racially or religiously intolerant ideas. He must help people in distress. He must be a good worker. He must keep himself clean in thought, speech, action, and personal habits. He must respect women, parents, and his nation's laws, with missing an apostrophe.
Yeah.
I pulled this from a published poster, and so they were missing the apostrophe. I think the cowboy is a patriot.
Yes.
So let me stop the screen share here, and we can talk about these one at a time. So we started talking about the first one, never shooting first. Again, a trope of all those westerns. I recall the Mythbusters doing an episode on whether it was possible to shoot a gun out of someone's hand, because that was another trope too, right?
Certainly possible.
Yes, they found it was possible, but it's extremely difficult.
Well, yeah, the target's very small, and I don't think shooting the gun out of someone's hands would allow that whoever was holding the gun in the first place to escape injury.
Oh no, no, not at all. Well, there was a lot of unrealistic depiction of the usage and effect of firearms.
Oh yeah.
In Western movies and television. So 6 guns that would shoot dozens of times without reloading, and there were lots of things that were unrealistic. So hit a smaller man, we briefly talked about, or take unfair advantage. So of course, depends on your definition of what unfair is.
Sure.
But generally it would mean bushwhacking some varmint, taking them by surprise. Always the showdown with the bad guy's henchmen with lever action rifles on the tops of the buildings, right?
And certainly you were allowed to trick an opponent who outnumbered you. That was, I mean, done all the time. You're able to use your brain to figure out a way to get the edge if you were outnumbered or outgunned or whatever. So yeah, but taking an unfair advantage, that this is just a fair play thing,
right?
Right.
Well, and I think Han shot first from Star Wars, and that discussion was that would not have been a point of discussion without the long-standing trope, cowboy trope, of never shooting first.
Right. Well, Han Solo was an anti-hero.
Right.
So
it works with that, but the only way that made sense was the cowboy trope.
Yeah. Right.
So number 2, he must never go back on his word or a trust confided in him. So there you got veritas, honesty, loyalty.
Veritas is really the next one directly.
Yes.
So, but loyalty,
Sure,
trustworthiness,
yeah,
those are all
well,
things
and
we talk about.
someone once gave a very succinct word, a definition of honor, what it means to be honorable, and it means you're as good as your word. If you are, you're honorable. Now, I think that's limited because somebody could promise to do bad things, and if they kept their word,
Right. Yeah.
they're not.
Right.
Yeah, right. But in general, it's a useful, functional definition of being honorable is not going back on your word, or
Right.
trust confided in him, and that's loyalty and um,
Discretion. I mean, it's
discretion. Yeah.
lots of things there, but all covered in our list,
Yes.
our primary list.
He must always tell the truth.
Yep. And there's Veritas. There it is.
Right. Now, there's there certainly are situations depicted where the good guy in these movies, in these situations, would say, well, how many times, set up the rifles with dummies to make it look like
Right.
there are more people than there are. Well, that's not true. That's a deception.
But again,
the
that is,
sun's
I
in
think,
your eye, look behind, or your shoes untied, or those
right.
are. So where's the limit on that? And that's,
Well, I think the what's talked about here is he must always tell the truth. When asked a direct question, he can't lie. He can certainly, again, deceive an opponent who outnumbers him, or to gain or mitigate an advantage that his opponent might have.
yes. Well, as Spock said, I'm really mixing genre metaphors here,
Yeah.
but Spock, when said, you lied, someone said to him, he said, I exaggerated.
Yeah. Well, I've also heard it said that Star Trek was just Wagon Train in space. So
yeah,
it's a
yeah, I've heard
stretch. I
that
mean,
too. I've heard that too. I don't know if it was Wagon Train as much as F Troop, maybe. But
well, I think Wagon Train, it works for Wagon Train because they were always traveling and coming upon situations as they traveled.
mhm.
So let's keep moving here.
Oh, okay.
He
He must be gentle with children, the elderly, and animals.
All right. I'm not sure what virtue that one of our virtues that necessarily, I mean, it's kindness in a way.
No, noblesse oblige in some ways.
Okay.
Courtesy.
Courtesy, sure.
So gentility, as in gentleman, as in courtesy, I think is what that is.
Well, I think it's an easy way for us to define it. I think this is too straightforward a list for them to have thought of it that way. They just mean gentle, kind,
yes, kind,
not
yeah,
not harsh or violent.
right.
So
Okay.
fair enough.
He must not advocate or possess racially or religiously intolerant ideas.
Now that's jumped out at me when I read it.
Yes.
Coming out of the 40s and 50s,
yes,
I think that I am surprised that there wasn't just sort of a tacit ignoring of any of that.
Yeah, I think it's really remarkably progressive for that era. And but when you think about the Well, think about the era and what has come before and what is going on in the 40s. You know, World War, religious
yeah,
intolerance, racial intolerance. It's still, for that time, remarkably progressive.
yeah. It could be a straight up anti-Nazi
Yes,
sentiment, is what that might be.
pro-American, anti-Nazi, because the cowboy was then, and had been for quite a while at that point, a symbol of America.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
But remarkable in its inclusion, I think, even so.
oh yeah, absolutely. Um, now, certainly TV Westerns in the 50s, and Gene Autry moved into TV Westerns from his films. When the films, the when television came in, instead of giving kids a quarter and sending them to the movies on Saturday for hours,
Right.
they could sit at home and watch cartoons Saturday morning and watch Westerns, when they
All
came up
afternoon.
from school, and all afternoon and so on. And all of those Westerns had a similar kind of code. Superman had a code like that. I remember seeing a Superman poster about good citizenship, and I remember good citizenship things in school, including don't dress too flashy, because you don't want to make other students feel bad if they can't afford
Right.
really fancy clothes and stuff. Things like that. That those were absolutely commonplace, accepted, and widespread in the 50s and 60s, and now would be denounced by some people as being too, quote unquote, woke.
Yep.
Except that's what we all grew up seeing.
Sure. There's a poster, there's a Superman poster that says, a real American never points out or criticizes someone for their race or their religion. And it's right. I mean, that it is Superman himself speaking and saying this to kids. There's a little crowd in the poster, there's a little crowd of kids around him. And that's, well, 30s, 40s. So,
Yeah.
but Superman was written by a couple of Jewish guys.
Yes, it was. Siegel and Schuster.
Yeah.
So here, let me.
Are you looking for that poster?
I got it here. There we go.
Yeah, that's it. You hear anybody talk against a schoolmate or anyone else because of his religion, race, or national origin, tell him that kind of talk is un-American.
Yep. Superman.
Right on. Yeah, I see that posted here and there.
Yep.
So this is right in line with all that.
Yep.
Still jumps out at me.
It does. It remarkable for its time.
Right.
But part of what became a consistent idea of what Americanism is, as the melting pot, the land of opportunity, and so on.
Well, there are, I suspect certain segments of the population would just point to that to show that, well, Hollywood's been liberal forever.
Well, Superman was created by a couple of Jewish guys. So.
Right. Right.
Well, so, and it's, they had reason for doing it too.
Yeah.
So, he must help people in distress. That, again, noblesse oblige.
That I think is very clearly noblesse oblige.
Yes.
You must help people in distress.
You cannot look the other way. You can't turn away.
Right.
He must be a good worker.
Now, this to me is where the capitalist
yes
theme of Hollywood comes to the fore here. I mean, yes, when you are tasked with a job, you should do your best.
Yes.
And that nobody argues that, really. So I'm gonna go with that as the sentiment there.
Yeah, I think the phrasing of it, though, moves it away from the idea of doing your best because it's worth doing, personal excellence, diligence, fortitude, all of those things that we talk about as terms of virtues, because it says he must be a good worker.
Yeah, I to me, this is, you must give your employer every ounce of effort, is right. I think what that is saying.
Yes. I think the flip side of that should be, you should treat people who, if you are an employer, you should treat people who work for you with respect, telling the truth, being gentle with them, never going back, all of those things.
Right.
Which it certainly does not always happen, but that would be the other side of this. But this is the cowboy. This is not the ranch owner. This is not the ranch owner's code, right?
Right. Well, he doesn't work. He doesn't. Again, our man Gene doesn't really work.
He just right. Yeah, I did remember wondering once where the Lone Ranger got the silver for his bullets.
Oh, he has a silver mine.
Yeah, exactly. I remembered that. I had to look it up because I didn't remember, but he had a silver mine, which is why he could make silver bullets.
And why he could afford. I mean, he was like Batman. He was rich.
Yeah.
He was independently wealthy with his silver mine, and which is what allowed him to travel around. And I mean, if he was in fact a Texas Ranger, and they never really discussed that.
Oh, and the origin story, they never discussed it in the TV series, I think, but his origin story in the earlier version of the radio serial.
Right. He's a former Texas Ranger.
Yeah, but he was left for dead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. But so he's not working. He's not being paid as a Ranger, is what I'm getting at. So yeah, he's independently wealthy.
Yes.
And what allows him to range around the West fighting evil.
And you know who his descendant was? The Green Hornet.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Right. The Green Hornet. But when you think about that, I remember thinking about this once, the Lone Ranger who just traveled with his faithful companion, Tonto, and never kissed the girl, rode off in the sunset. He had descendants. Therefore,
true. He must have settled down.
Must have settled
sowing
down.
some of his oats there.
Yep. So he must keep himself clean in thought, speech, action, and personal habits.
Boy, that's right out of the Boy Scouts manual.
Yeah, it sure is. So I think it depends how you define, as always, how you define these things. Clean in speech. Okay, he doesn't swear. Clean in action. He doesn't cheat at cards or whatever. Personal habits. Bathing.
Not sure not sure how Cowboy maintains his personal hygiene to a certain level, but
on a cattle drive, certainly not. But
no. Gets his bath once a month, whether he needs it or not.
Yeah. and clean in thought. So I think this part of the code here, clean in thought and action, is the anti-lustfulness.
Yes, this is the chastity
virtue thing.
Which neither of us particularly ascribe to.
Well, and I think, and this is a long subject for another discussion, is if one does not subscribe to chastity as in the meaning of abstinence, then how does one maintain your virtues, being virtuous in the sense of the chivalric virtues, and still enjoy healthy and respectful, I think is the key, relations. And well, but that's a lengthy discussion.
Yeah, and to me, this goes to the entire American Puritan. Sex is something you only do to procreate, and you shouldn't enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, you should be punished.
So yes, there is a technical term for that philosophy, Meshuggah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, and there are people who believe that, people who live by that. They have a right to believe and practice that, as long as they don't try to impose that on other people. And the problem is that too often is that people who subscribe to that puritanical belief system believe that they should impose that on everyone else.
Well, yeah, and because the, I don't know if they actually believe it, but the what I've heard is, well, it's destroying this country. If by not following these puritanical laws, you are destroying the country, and therefore they are justified in pushing this on everybody around them. So,
well, what is being destroyed? What do they think the country is?
Well, of course.
It's their privileged ownership, primary position in the country, in which they get to dictate the rules for everyone.
Well, or I think the ostensible, or what the ostensible reason, I think, would be portrayed as that. I mean, if we aren't honoring this, even larger, if we aren't honoring God, God is going to visit his wrath upon this nation, and we have to stop before something terrible happens, like it hasn't happened already.
Well, and now you get into the question of, does God do direct intervention in the affairs of people, or did God set everything in motion? And is there free will, or is there predetermination?
Yeah. Before we get too deep into theosophy here, I think we can figure out, we can finish this list and talk about this on another time.
Okay, yeah,
or not.
It is, well, what's interesting to me, and it's actually typical of our conversations, is that what ostensibly looks simple on the surface actually has all this other stuff going on underneath it.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. So number 9, he must respect women, parents, and his nation's laws.
Yeah, more puritanical.
Well, respecting women in that era often meant respecting them. So you respect them so much, you have to keep them from venturing into the world, put them on a pedestal. You're not respecting
yes,
their decisions. You're not respecting their autonomy. You're not respecting their agency.
you are
Right?
protecting them,
Protecting them.
but you're not. Yeah, it's not really respect. It's
It,
you're respecting them. You respect them, their physical person, but
yes.
otherwise they are to be cloistered and protected.
Yes. Now, respecting the physical person is at least
Some
was
it's
a
something.
step. That was something.
Yeah.
But not far enough, I would say. And respecting parents,
Is obedience.
yes, which is biblical in a lot of
Yep.
ways.
Yep.
And so I think respect here, again, it comes down to how you define respect. And
Well,
the,
by lumping all three of these things into one,
yeah,
we can glean what they mean by respect.
yes,
So, but it's like we said, you respect a woman you respect a woman physically. You don't force yourself on anybody,
right.
but otherwise you protect them and cloister them, because if you don't, somebody else is going to disrespect them physically, because that's what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Yes.
respect your parents, it means you obey your parents
And
in this context and in this era,
yeah.
right? um it doesn't matter whether you aren't allowed to judge them or their behavior. You merely obey.
And that was problematic in a lot of eras when parents treated their children like chattel.
Sure.
Or well, we still see it in schools, how schools are set up.
Mm-hmm.
The summer vacations, because children were needed on the farms to work. We see it in the schedule of school, so that parents could their kids could go off to school before they have to go to the factory or go to
Right.
work. The bells in schools, which condition students to respond to bells in factory and the assembly line and that sort of thing. I mean, there's so much of modern schooling, elementary and high school, that's reflected in um, that reflects the idea of obedience. And
Right.
consequently, my undergraduate students, I have to, I have had to, on several occasions, uh, I've had undergraduates say, well, that's not the way we did it in high school. So you got to listen to me now. This is not high school. And what
Right.
they were conditioning you to was obedience. And what I'm working with you to do is to question everything and to grow into that. And it's a real challenge for a lot of them.
if if they were truly teaching respect in school, what constitutes respect and what is worthy of respect, it would be a different thing.
Yes. Yes.
um and here's another, the third part of this one: he must respect his nation's laws.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our nation is designed, is built around the idea that if you don't like a law, you can change it. You don't have to respect the law. We make the law. We are
Right.
the law. So,
Well, and yeah, and think of the Jim Crow laws of this era.
mm-hmm.
The segregation, the when this list first came out, segregation and um um the discriminatory laws that
Sure.
existed, that did not deserve respect, that had to be dismantled.
I think the idea that, I mean, lawlessness obviously is insupportable, but respecting the law because it's a law is just giving over to authoritarianism. The idea is that once if our elected officials have created a law, that is the law. Now you must work within the law to change it.
Right.
But so in that sense, I guess you have to respect the law.
I think a better way of wording this would be to respect the institutions of democracy.
Okay,
to be an institution, to respect the institutions, so that, because the institutions are the mechanism by which we can change, modify, improve law.
Okay.
And then respect the law if so it all works together. The people who there are authoritarians who disrespect the institutions because the institutions protect democracy, so they want to dismantle the institutions so they can institute authoritarianism.
Agreed.
So I would reword this. So
well,
and that would be interesting to come up. We should all come up with our own cowboy code.
Well, that's what we did. You and I sat
Yes.
down and we came up with a new code for
Yes.
ourselves.
Yes.
That reflects our modern viewpoint.
Yes.
On
and
society.
The virtues. And that's what this entire endeavor is about. There we go.
And all 30 of you out there who have who are following us, and we hope you're all out there adapting your version of this code.
Which I think is important, that if it's not personal, if it's not personal, if it's not something you live by, it's not something that means anything.
Right. Then you might as well, you're a follower. We don't, when we say followers, you follow the podcast. Thank you very much if you're out there following us. But we aren't really looking for followers. We're looking for companions in this.
And minions.
I've got minions. They're more trouble than they're worth.
I don't have any minions. My minions have minions.
See, you watch Despicable Me, you find out that they're just not.
It's just not worth it. So the final number 10 of the Cowboy Code, the cowboy is a patriot.
Which is interesting, which follows that has to be stated separately from the last one.
Yes.
About respecting the nation's laws.
So what does patriotism mean? And wow, is that a loaded question?
And and I think we should do our next session just on that.
What is patriotism?
What is it? How does one act as a patriot through the virtues?
Well, that's a really good topic. I think I look forward to that one. Yeah.
So again, to me, this having it on this list just reflects the era.
Yes.
Right. Like you were saying, again, this is probably an anti-Nazi thing, and maybe an anti-communist thing.
Yeah, probably. Well, they were both going on at the same time.
Right.
But once the Nazis were defeated, the enemy there has to be an enemy, right? So it became the communists.
Yeah, right. Even though they were our allies right up till the end of the war.
Right.
So yeah, including it in this list, I think is just like, again, I say the studio was the manufacturer of this whole list. They felt like they had to put that on there because this could have easily been during the McCarthy.
Well, I think the list was this list first came up in the late 40s, but you think about the McCarthy era and when that anti-communism happened and when that ended, and then that certainly in that era, and particularly coming out of Hollywood,
Right. That's what I
and
mean.
the blacklists, the all of that. When
Well, McCarthy's famous hearings were like in 52 and 53, were they
right,
not?
yeah,
So this is right, the
it's Liz is leading right into that, yeah,
yeah, the
that's
sentiment is there.
right.
And Hollywood is being looked at as this hotbed of communist propaganda. So I think it made sense for the studios to put this kind of, stamp on everything, that we're all
Well, and this
American.
is about when the comics code came into being too. Do you remember
Yes.
that when things got the seal of approval of the comics code? The Hays Code in Hollywood came in earlier. That
Right.
was the
That was mainly a lewd. That was
yeah,
mainly about sexual
yes,
references and stuff
yeah.
like that. But
That's how the Tarzan movies changed into essentially, like Tarzan knows best, father knows,
well,
Ozzie and Harriet in the jungle
well,
movies.
except that it was, interestingly, that I thought it was Jane knows best. Jane was the civilized one.
Yeah.
Tarzan was, always meant well, but always kind of a not quite getting it. And Jane having to explain to him how things worked. And then
Well,
he would,
in a lot of ways, that was the archetype of so many 50s, 60s family sitcoms with the mother's the smart one and the father is the,
oh,
goofy,
well,
except
when
for
they were,
father knows best.
except for Father, well, yeah, when they were comedies,
Right.
they were well, I mean, that's not even, I think there was a good helping of both.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, right up to I Love Lucy. Um, Lucille Ball really kind of turned that on its head a little bit. Is that she wasn't stupid, she wasn't airheaded, she was ambitious and reckless.
Yes.
um,
That's a I I have enormous respect for her entrepreneurship, her creativity, her brilliance as a comedian and actor. Um, I I even as a kid did not like the on-screen relationship between Lucy and Ricky, because they were often lying to each other. And I found that, even as a kid, I found that disturbing. I much preferred I thought they're one of the best relationships between a married couple on television in that era was between Gomez and Morticia Adams.
oh, oh yeah, right. But
That was
because their whole lifestyle was absurd, they didn't have to create an absurd situation simply through their behaviors. I mean, but you look at, look at the Flintstones, for gosh sakes. I mean, it's
well, the Flintstones was the Honeymooners,
yeah, right,
was the Jetsons, it's the same story.
yeah. But the idea is that, or King of Queens, more
Yeah.
modern. It's the often the guy or whoever it is, whoever is the sort of antagonist in the episode, means well, or is trying to, they're lying to protect the other's feelings, or they're hiding something because they want it to be a surprise, or they messed something up purely by accident and don't want them to find out.
And these go back to Commedia dell'arte archetypes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They absolutely do. Very similar stock. And in that era, there were so many great character actors, and I have a great fondness for these great character actors who always they perfected a part, and then they played it in every TV series, every Western, every detective show, every cop. There was the grizzled old prospector. There was the stuffy bank clerk, hotel clerk. There was the rich banker, rancher, whatever. There was the shady gambler. There was and it was always the same guys. They were always moving around between
well, in a
shows.
way that worked to Hollywood's advantage, in that it was a kind of a shorthand for the character. When that actor walked on stage, you knew who that character was.
And that's exactly what Commedia dell'arte did. You knew who Harlequino was, you knew who Dottore was, you knew who put all of those characters. It's absolutely a shorthand.
You understood their motivations without, the moment they walked on stage, you knew what they were about and what role they were going to play in the story. So, yeah.
Yep. So I do think that our next episode, we should look at the idea of patriotism through the lens of the virtues.
Good. I think that's a great idea. I think we should, and incredibly timely.
Yes. Yes. So I think that we have dissected Gene Autry's Cowboy Code.
Yes.
And I think there's always more to unpack in terms of each of the definitions, the meanings, the modern interpretation, the history, all of that.
Mm-hmm. And anytime, if you're out there looking at this and you're aware of some modern or, late 20th century or something code that's like this, that might be of interest to it, please send it to us, because we'll dice it up and have a look at the insides of it.
I think it would be interesting, and this I hadn't thought of this till now, and I have to investigate this, whether some of the faux patriots, the the actually insurrectionist groups,
the Al-Qaeda.
Y'all,
Meal Team 6.
Whether what's in
the Meal Team 6, have you heard
that? Whether or not they have a code of conduct, a code of belief, of philosophy, and that is something that it would be interesting to see and to look at.
I wonder if we could narrow it down to like insurrectionist groups, like for instance Oath Keepers or
the 3%ers or the Proud Boys or the
Proud Boys. Yeah, if somewhere they've got a code, a manifesto
that'd be interesting to see. That would be interesting to see. I'm pretty sure that advocating intolerance is not big on their list. Not advocating intolerance. Number 5, he must not advocate or possess.
Oh, right. Yeah. I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
I think that I would be willing to wager, though, that I bet there is some ambiguous language that makes intolerance somehow more patriotic or heroic.
Yeah. Protecting our precious bodily fluids, as
this is something
said in Dr. Strangelove.
Yes.
George C. Scott.
Was it him that said that line in Dr. Strangelove?
Or was it Dr. Strangelove? I think it was George C. Scott's character, but I haven't watched the film in a long time.
Yeah. It was a hard watch for me, really.
George C. Scott, Kubrick wanted George C. Scott to overact that role. And George C. Scott did not want to do it, and so he underplayed it. And then in the last take of the day, Kubrick said, "Okay, now just humor me, just go big. I won't use it." And those were always the takes he used. I remember in college, I saw a double feature of Failsafe and Dr. Strangelove back to back.
I'm not sure I've ever seen Failsafe.
Oh, you should see Failsafe.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I won't, no spoilers. I won't tell you anything about it.
Right. Okay.
Other than Rosebud is a sled.
That's not in Failsafe.
Yeah.
I know better than that.
Yeah, look up Failsafe.
Okay. So. All right. So I think we have sufficiently, as you say, dissected this particular list.
I think we have.
We're always looking for more. Please send us your suggestions, ask us questions. We love those. Like, share, all those things.
Yep.
Hit those, smash those buttons.
And
click on the thing.
Yep. And until we see you again, be thou
a good night
and true.